Today, I want to tell you a story so powerful it forces you to ask yourself what you would do when no one is watching. Set against the harsh silence of the Wild West, where snow buries secrets and the past never truly stays behind. This was a place where danger waited behind every ridge, and one wrong decision could decide who lived and who vanished forever. It all started with something small. A knock of fate in the middle of a storm, a choice that would ignite a chain of events no one could outrun. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The wind screamed through the Colorado highlands like a wounded beast, hurling snow against the rough-cut walls of the cabin until the boards rattled in protest. Once, those same hands inside had steadied the dying and pulled countless souls back from the edge. Young physicians once waited for her judgment. Wealthy families once praised her devotion. That was before the night everything collapsed. Before Joss Moraine died under her care. Before House Moraine decided someone had to bleed for their loss. Evelyn Crowan's fingers brushed the creased letter hidden deep in her coat pocket. The one that had ended her life as she knew it. Negligence. Gross incompetence, resulting in death. The words burned as sharply now as they had the day she first read them. It didn't matter that the boy had concealed his condition. Didn't matter that he'd swallowed dangerous medicines that reacted fatally with treatment. Didn't matter that 3 physicians examined him and missed what she discovered far too late. The Moraines wanted a sacrifice, and a nurse of immigrant blood made an easy one. The scandal erased her completely. No hospital would take her. Former colleagues turned away when they saw her coming. Every coin she owned vanished into legal battles she had no power to win. So she ran west, as far as iron rails could carry her. Then farther still, until she found an abandoned prospector's cabin high in the mountains, a place so remote that shame itself could not follow. That had been 3 months ago, when autumn still offered mercy, and her small purse held enough money to survive. Now February showed its teeth. Her last sack of cornmeal had emptied a week earlier. The rabbit snares lay untouched. The roots she'd stored froze solid in the corner like useless stones. Evelyn pushed herself upright slowly, 32 years old, and her joints groaned as if she were twice that. Hunger gnawed. Cold hollowed her bones. The weight of disgrace pressed heavier than either. She needed firewood, though stepping into the storm made her limbs ache. Still, freezing felt only slightly worse than starving, and at least the cold would be faster. She wrapped torn rags around her boots, knowing the snow would soak through within minutes. Her coat, a man's discarded garment bought from a traveling trader, hung loose on her narrow frame. She had always been small, but months of deprivation had carved her down to angles and bone. The moment she opened the door, the blizzard lunged inward. Snow whipped in violent spirals, erasing the world beyond a few feet. Evelyn lowered her head and forced the door shut behind her, staggering toward the woodpile beneath the eastern eave. Her hands, once steady enough for surgical instruments, shook as she gathered the last thin sticks. The cold cut through her gloves like biting steel. She managed half an armful when the wind shifted suddenly. For a brief moment, the air cleared. That was when she saw him. At first she thought hunger had finally stolen her reason. A dark shape against endless white, too large to be natural, too still to be living. But as she stumbled closer, instinct surged stronger than weakness. A man lay face down in the snow. His heavy coat was torn and blackened with blood. Nearby stood a horse, head drooping low, reins tangled in the bare limbs of a scrub oak. Evelyn dropped the firewood and rushed forward, boots sliding dangerously across ice. She fell to her knees beside the unmoving body. Her training took over instantly. Fingers searched his neck. There, a pulse. Weak, thready, but alive. Beneath the snow, his skin still carried warmth. She tried to roll him over and gasped at his weight. He was tall and broad-shouldered, built like a man shaped by labor and long days under open sky. It took everything she had left to turn him onto his back. Dark hair clung to his forehead. A rough beard shadowed his jaw. Blood had frozen near his temple, but it was the torn hole in his coat that chilled her deeper. High on the right side, still bleeding into the snow. A gunshot. Recent, maybe 6 hours, judging by the blood loss and cooling skin. Evelyn sank back on her heels, dread rising fast. She had no medicine, no proper tools, no food. Barely enough firewood to last the night. The sensible choice would be to take what she could from his saddlebags and leave him to the mountain. He would likely die regardless, and trying to save him might cost her own life. Yet even as the thought surfaced, her hands were already moving, checking breath, measuring pulse, examining the wound. She had sworn an oath once, when such promises still meant something, to preserve life where possible. The world had stripped her of everything else, but it had failed to take that from her. "Sir," she said softly, shaking his shoulder. "Sir, can you hear me?" No answer. Her gaze flicked toward the cabin, barely 20 feet away, though it felt like 20 miles. She couldn't carry him. She could barely keep herself upright. But she had to try. The horse let out a quiet whicker, steam rolling from its nostrils. A beautiful animal, strong, patient, intelligent. Evelyn noticed absently that it was a bay stallion with white stockings, the kind only men of means could afford. Its saddle bore tooled leather and silver conchos. An idea struck. She rose unsteadily and approached the horse with slow steps, speaking in the low, calming tone her father once taught her back on their Ohio farm. "Easy now. That's it, boy. I need your help." The storm howled around them as fate shifted, quietly, irrevocably, in the frozen mountains of the West. "Easy now. Easy, boy. That's it. I need your help." Evelyn Crowan kept her voice low and steady as the wind clawed at her words. The stallion stood trembling, too worn down by the storm to resist. He allowed her to take the reins, his breath steaming heavily in the freezing air. She guided him closer to his fallen rider, then dropped back to her knees. If she could just get the man across the saddle, somehow, she might still have a chance. It took nearly an hour. 3 times her legs buckled beneath her. 3 times she collapsed into the snow, lungs burning, vision dimming. And 3 times she forced herself upright again, driven by stubborn will and the quiet knowledge that every passing minute drained more life from the man bleeding beside her. At last, through awkward leverage, raw desperation, and the horse's patient cooperation, she managed to drag the unconscious body up and over the saddle. The walk back to the cabin became a nightmare. Evelyn led the horse one careful step at a time. One hand clenched around the reins, the other braced against the man's back to keep him from sliding free. Snow lashed her face. The wind howled, trying to tear them apart and scatter them into the white nothingness. When the cabin finally loomed out of the storm, relief nearly dropped her to her knees. Getting him inside proved worse. Adrenaline carried her where strength no longer could. She pulled him down from the saddle, staggering backward through the doorway as his full weight collapsed against her. They hit the floor together, Evelyn trapped beneath him, gasping for air like a fish dragged onto land. The stallion would have to manage on his own. She crawled free long enough to strip off the saddle and bridle, tossing them just inside the door before the horse wandered toward the crude lean-to beside the cabin. The closest thing to shelter she could offer. Then she shoved the door shut and turned back to her patient. His color had worsened, lips tinged blue, skin cold and drawn from blood loss. She had no time to hesitate. Her medical supplies were pitiful. A half-empty bottle of whiskey she'd been saving, several strips of cloth torn from her spare petticoat, and a small sewing kit threaded with silk. It wasn't much, but it was all she had. With shaking hands, Evelyn fed the fire, burning precious kindling until enough warmth filled the room for her to work. Then she let familiarity take over, the practiced rhythm of crisis that lived deep in her muscles when fear threatened to steal her thoughts. The coat came off first. Beneath it, his shirt was soaked through. She slit the fabric away with her kitchen knife and exposed the wound. The bullet had entered just below the collarbone. There was no exit. Still inside. Infection was nearly certain without proper care. She cleaned the wound as thoroughly as she could, boiling snow in her lone pot and using what whiskey she dared spare. The sting brought a groan from his throat. He muttered something unintelligible but did not wake. She counted that as mercy, because what followed would be worse. The bullet had to come out. Evelyn held her knife in the fire until the blade glowed faint red, then waited until it cooled just enough to grip. No laudanum, no ether, nothing but resolve, and his fading consciousness. She began to probe. Fresh blood welled instantly. His body went rigid. His eyes snapped open, wild, unfocused. A powerful hand shot up and clamped around her wrist with crushing strength. "Please," Evelyn said, holding his gaze despite the fear knotting in her chest. "I'm trying to help you. The bullet has to come out." Something in her voice, or perhaps her face, reached him. His grip loosened slightly. A faint nod followed. Then his eyes rolled back again. She didn't wait. Her world narrowed to flesh and steel. The slow search for foreign metal within living tissue. Then, a scrape. Lead. She adjusted her angle, praying she would not strike anything vital, and worked the bullet free. Blood flowed again, but not the pulsing arterial spray she'd feared. She packed the wound with whiskey-soaked cloth and stitched it closed with small, precise sutures, neat enough to make her old instructor proud. The injury to his head proved shallow, needing only cleaning and a simple bandage. By the time she finished, full darkness had settled outside. The storm still battered the cabin, but inside a fragile calm took hold. Evelyn sank back onto her heels, trembling as exhaustion finally claimed her. She had done all she could. What happened next rested in God's hands. The man lay unmoving on her floor, chest rising and falling in slow, steady rhythm. By firelight, she noticed the quality of his clothing beneath the blood and trail dust. His boots alone could have paid for months of supplies. A rancher, perhaps, or a man with holdings. Someone whose absence would be noticed. Someone who would be searched for. She wondered what violence had driven him into her path. The West forged hard men and demanded even harder choices. Perhaps he'd earned that bullet. Perhaps the men who fired it were even now following his trail through the storm. And yet, as she watched his features soften into something close to peaceful sleep, she found she did not care. For the first time in months, she had used her hands for what they were meant to do. She had stood between life and death, and held the line, if only for tonight. Tomorrow would bring new trials. He would need constant care to fight infection, and she had no food left to help him heal. Barely enough fire lingered in the hearth to keep the cold at bay. Still, for Note's single quiet moment, Evelyn Crowan allowed herself a thin breath of satisfaction. She was still a healer. Let disgrace rot where it lay. The fever came with the dawn. Evelyn woke to broken, delirious murmuring. Words tangled and shapeless. Her patient thrashed weakly on the floor where she'd been forced to leave him. She had spent the night half awake in the chair, jerking upright every time his breathing shifted, certain she would open her eyes and find him gone. Now she knelt beside him, pressing her palm to his forehead. Burning. Far too hot. The wound had begun its inevitable rebellion against crude surgery and mountain conditions. Without proper medicine, she had only stubborn will and what the land could offer. "Water," he rasped. His eyes fluttered open but saw nothing. "Mara. Water." Evelyn reached for her tin cup and slid an arm beneath his head, lifting him carefully as she helped him drink. Sweat soaked his dark hair despite the bitter chill inside the cabin. The fever was tightening its grip. She had to break it, or lose him. Through that endless day, she bathed his face with cloths cooled in snow melt and forced willow bark tea past his lips whenever he could swallow. It was the only remedy she possessed, gathered months earlier when she still believed she might survive the winter. He tossed and muttered through the hours. Names slipped from his mouth. Myra. Bren. Others she couldn't catch. His hands opened and closed as if grasping for something just beyond reach. During one rare moment of clarity, his eyes focused fully on her face. They were gray, she noticed, the color of storm clouds rolling over open prairie. "Angel," he whispered hoarsely. "No," Evelyn said gently. "Just a woman. You're safe now." His brow creased, as though wrestling with a thought too heavy to hold. "They shot me. Valor's men. The water rights." Before she could ask more, his eyes glazed again, and the fever pulled him back under. But those few words painted a picture she understood all too well. Water rights. In this land, water decided who lived and who vanished. Men killed for far less. The second night brought crisis. His fever spiked dangerously. Blood seeped through the bandages. Evelyn stared at him and understood the truth with cold clarity. Without stronger intervention, he would not see morning. She had one option left. One desperate gamble. The storm had finally burned itself out, leaving a sky of merciless stars and cold sharp enough to cut skin. Wrapped in every scrap she owned, Evelyn stepped outside and made her way toward the lean-to shelter. The bay stallion lifted its head and nicked softly. It had found the forgotten stack of old hay stored there. In the saddlebags, she discovered miracles. A flask of good whiskey, clean bandages, and, by some act of mercy, a small bottle of laudanum. There were other items as well, confirming what she had already suspected. Letters addressed to Thorne Calderix, owner of the Double M Ranch. A leather wallet heavy with more money than she'd seen since leaving Chicago. And a photograph. A young woman with kind eyes and the same strong jaw. A sister. Myra Crowan, perhaps. Evelyn took only what she needed. The money whispered to her empty stomach like a temptation. But she turned away. She had kept her integrity through disgrace and starvation. She would not lose it now. With the laudanum, she cleaned and redressed the wound properly. She brewed a stronger willow bark mixture, adding measured drops of whiskey, something that might truly fight infection. All night she fed it to him, watched his pulse, tracked his breathing with relentless focus. By the third dawn, the fever broke. Thorne Calderix opened his eyes to unfamiliar shadows and silence. Pain greeted him first, deep and throbbing beneath his collarbone, flaring when he tried to move. The second thing he noticed was the woman. She sat slumped in a crooked chair beside him, exhaustion etched into every line. Not young, not old, just worn thin by hardship. Her dark hair, streaked prematurely with gray, had been pinned in haste. Her dress was more mending than cloth, yet her hands, resting quietly in her lap, were clean, scarred with the honest calluses of work. Memory returned in fragments. The ambush near Devil's Creek, Vailor Blackrin's hired guns stepping from behind the rocks, the burning strike of the bullet, the frantic ride into the storm. Then nothing. He tried to speak. Only a dry croak emerged. The woman stirred instantly, eyes snapping open with the sharp awareness of someone long accustomed to crisis. "You're awake," she said calmly, lifting the cup. Small sips. The water tasted like life itself. Thorn obeyed. Noting the practiced way she checked his bandages, his pulse, the careful precision in every movement. "You're a nurse," he said once his voice returned. Something tightened in her expression. "I was," she replied quietly. "Not so long ago," he murmured. "That work was professional." He gestured weakly toward his chest. "Thorn Calderix," he said after a moment. "I owe you my life." She rose stiffly and turned back to the fire. "You owe me nothing," Evelyn said. "I did what anyone would have done." A faint breath of a smile touched his lips. Anyone wouldn't have dragged a man twice her size through a blizzard. The fire cracked softly between them as the mountain wind whispered outside. Thorn let out a rough breath and shook his head slightly. "Anyone wouldn't have dug a bullet out with kitchen tools," he said. "Anyone wouldn't have broken a fever with skill instead of prayers." Evelyn's hand paused on the iron poker. "You were delirious," she replied. "You couldn't have known." "I know enough," he said quietly. He studied her profile in the firelight, the sharpness carved by hunger, the hollows beneath her eyes, the proud line of her shoulders that refused to sag despite everything she'd endured. "I know you saved me when you barely had enough left to save yourself." She turned then, and defiance flashed in her brown eyes. "I don't need your pity, Mr. Calderix." "Good," he answered evenly, "because I'm not offering pity. I'm offering gratitude. There's a difference." They held each other's gaze across the small cabin. Two stubborn spirits recognizing something unspoken in the other. At last, Evelyn returned to her chair. "You mentioned Vailor Blackrin," she said quietly. "He's the one who had you shot?" Thorn's jaw tightened. "His men," he said. "On his orders. We've been fighting over water rights for nearly 2 years." He drew a careful breath before continuing. "The stream that feeds my land crosses his property downstream. This drought has driven men mad, desperate enough to kill." "In Blackrin's mind, yes," he went on. "He's already forced 2 ranchers off their land, bought them out for nothing when their wells ran dry. But the Double M holds senior water rights, legal and binding." His eyes hardened. "The only way he gets them is if I'm dead." Evelyn absorbed the information with a healer's steady calm. "Will he come looking?" "Count on it," Thorn said. "His men watched me ride into the storm. They'll assume I couldn't have gone far." He tried to push himself upright and gasped as pain ripped through his chest. "I need to get back," he said through clenched teeth. "Warn my people." Evelyn moved instantly, pressing him back down. Her touch was gentle, her grip unyielding. "You need to lie still before you tear those stitches," she said. "You're in no condition to ride." "You don't understand," he said sharply. "If Blackrin believes I'm dead, he'll move on the ranch. My foreman, Bren Hollow, is capable, but he can't hold against a full assault." His voice roughened. "And my sister? Mara Crowan runs the household. She won't abandon the land, not even if it kills her." The names he'd cried out in fever came rushing back to Evelyn. A quiet ache stirred in her chest. Sympathy she hadn't expected. She knew too well what it meant to lose everything to people with power and influence. "How long before they come?" she asked. Thorne considered. "The storm will have buried my trail. They'll search the usual shelters first, line shacks, caves." His gaze lifted toward the door. "This place is remote enough they might miss it at first. 3 days, maybe 4. Then we have 3 days to get you strong enough to travel." "We?" he asked, one eyebrow lifting. Evelyn met his gaze without hesitation. "You can't ride alone in your condition. You'll need help reaching your ranch. The Double M is 15 miles through rough country. That puts you in danger." She exhaled slowly. "Mr. Calderix, I've been in danger since the moment I dragged you through that door. At least this way, I can see my patient safely home." Thorne studied her for a long moment. There was steel in this woman, hidden beneath worn cloth and exhaustion. He'd built his ranch by learning to judge character fast. Every instinct he had told him Evelyn Crowan was someone he could trust. "All right," he said finally, "but I pay my debts. When this is over," she interrupted softly, "you'll return to your life, and I'll return to mine." The finality in her voice left no room for argument. "For now," she added, rising, "you need food to rebuild your strength. I'll see what I can manage." She crossed to the corner that served as her kitchen. Thorne watched her shoulders tighten as she surveyed the meager supplies. Pride kept her from saying anything, but he could read the truth plainly enough. The bare shelves, the single pot, the careful rationing of water she'd given him. "My saddlebags," he said carefully. "There should be jerky, hardtack, trail food. It's not much, but it'll help." Relief flickered across her face before she masked it. "I'll check." When she stepped outside, Thorne settled back and enforced himself to breathe steadily. He'd survived the ambush. He'd survived the fever. Now came the harder fight, reaching home alive with killers on his trail. Yet something about Evelyn Crowan's quiet competence stirred hope where none should exist. She'd pulled him back from death once. He suspected that was only the beginning. Later, when she returned, the jerky tasted like hope itself. Evelyn chewed slowly, savoring the salt and smoke, forcing herself not to devour it like the starving creature she'd nearly become. For the first time in weeks, her body remembered what strength felt like. Across from her, Thorne Calderix watched in silence, the kind that noticed too much and missed nothing at all. "When was the last time you ate a proper meal?" he asked quietly. Evelyn considered lying, then decided not to. Something about him invited truth. "Before my last supply trip to town," she said. 6 weeks ago." His expression darkened, not with pity, but with restrained fury. 6 weeks, he muttered. "Christ almighty." "I've managed," Evelyn replied stiffly. "You've survived," he said. "That's not the same thing." He shifted carefully, still weak but recovering faster under her care. "Why here?" he asked. "Why choose a place this forgotten?" Evelyn stared into the flames, weighing her answer. Sometimes nowhere is the only place left to run. From what? The question lingered between them like smoke. She had kept that part of herself sealed away for so long that speaking it felt like tearing open scar tissue. But he had trusted her with his life, his fears, his enemies. Perhaps she owed him the truth. "From disgrace," she said at last. "From the ruins of everything I used to be." Thorne waited, silent, steady, patient as the mountains beyond the walls. That quiet undid her. So unlike the shouting prosecutors and sharp accusations she'd faced back east. I was the senior nurse at Mercy Hospital, Evelyn began. 12 years of service, hundreds of lives saved. She paused, steadying her breath. Then Joss Moraine was brought in. 15 years old, son of House Moraine, bankers with influence. He complained of stomach pain. His mother insisted it was nothing serious. Her fingers tightened in her lap. When I examined him, I noticed things his family hadn't mentioned. Bruising that suggested fights. Pupils reacting strangely to light. She swallowed. I suspected patent medicines, possibly laudanum. I tried to warn the attending physician, but he dismissed me. The Moraines were generous donors, Thorne said quietly. She nodded. Their son couldn't possibly be mixed up in such things, but he was. Cocaine tooth drops, Thorne guessed. Laudanum for sleep, God knows what else. Evelyn's hands clenched. When we gave him ether for what should have been routine surgery, his heart stopped. I tried everything, every technique I knew. Her voice faltered. Nothing brought him back. The fire cracked softly in the silence. Outside, wind whispered through the pines like regret itself. The family needed someone to blame, she continued. A wealthy boy couldn't have died from his own habits. She let out a breath that held no humor. So they chose incompetence, negligence, and who better than the Irish immigrant's daughter who'd risen too far above her station? Thorne's jaw tightened. They made you a scapegoat. Completely. The trial was a farce. Witnesses suddenly forgot what they'd seen. Records vanished. The physician who ignored my warnings testified that I'd never spoken at all. She gave a hollow laugh. 6 months later, the hospital opened a new wing named after the Moraine family. And you ran. What else could I do? She said softly. No hospital would hire me. My savings vanished into lawyers who couldn't fight money and influence. She gestured toward the small, battered cabin. So, yes, I ran, as far as I could, to a place where my shame couldn't follow, where I could disappear. Thorne remained quiet for a long moment. Then he said, My sister Myra Crowan is a healer too. Evelyn looked up. Not formally trained, he continued, but she has the gift. She tends anyone who needs it, ranch hands, neighbors, even Blackrin's people when they come asking. He shook his head faintly. She says healing isn't about who deserves it or who can pay. It's about answering when someone calls for help. The parallel struck her unexpectedly. 3 nights ago, Thorne said, you answered. He met her eyes. Starving, exhausted, with every reason to let a stranger die. You answered anyway. That tells me more about who you are than any jury in Chicago ever could. Tears burned behind her eyes. She blinked them back hard. Pretty words won't change what happened. No, he said, but they might change what happens next. He leaned forward slightly, holding her gaze. I meant what I said about paying debts. Evelyn, the double M needs someone with medical skill. She stiffened. Myra does her best, he continued, but she has no formal training. And there's a town nearby, Martinez. They've been without a doctor for 2 years. I'm not a doctor, she said quietly. He gave a faint, weary smile. You're a disgraced nurse who saved my life with kitchen tools and willow bark tea, who held me through fever and infection with nothing but skill and resolve. His gray eyes held hers, steady as stone. That sounds like a healer to me. I don't give a damn what Chicago society says. Thorn Calderic said firmly. Out here, folks are judged by what they do, not by rumors stitched together by powerful mouths. Evelyn Crowan rose abruptly, needing space from the weight of his words. You're grateful, she said. I understand that. But gratitude fades. When you're back with your people, when you remember I'm just a fallen woman, stop. The command in his voice startled them both. Thorn softened his tone, but not his certainty. You're not just anything, and I'm not some greenhorn tossing promises into the wind. When I give my word, I keep it. She turned to his bandages, clinging to routine to steady herself. His skin was warm now, healthy warm, no trace of fever. The wound showed the first honest signs of healing. Her fingers trembled slightly. Why? She asked quietly. Why do you care what happens to me? Thorn reached out and caught her hand, stilling it. His palm was rough from years of rope and leather, yet his touch was careful, because I recognize something in you, he said. The same thing that made me fight for my land when everyone said I was too young, too foolish. The same thing that made Mara Crowan stand beside me when our parents died, leaving us with nothing but debt and stubborn hope. Evelyn looked down at their joined hands, his sun darkened and scarred, hers pale, worn thin by work and hunger. What's that? She asked. Steel, he said simply. Pure, stubborn steel. It bends, but it doesn't break. He released her gently. The West needs people like that. God knows I do. She stepped back, folding her arms around herself. You barely know me. I know enough, he replied. You could have taken my money while I lay unconscious. Could have left me to die and survived months on what was in my saddlebags. But you didn't. You spent your last supplies saving a stranger. His expression softened. I've stayed alive by learning to read people fast. And you, Evelyn Crowan, are someone worth knowing. The words warmed her more than the fire ever could. She'd been defined by disgrace for so long she'd nearly forgotten she might still be more than her failure. I watched you during the fever, Thorn continued. You never left my side. 36 hours straight, fighting for a life that owed you nothing. That's not just training, he said quietly. That's character. I took an oath, she murmured. And Chicago tried to make you break it, he replied. But you didn't. Not even here, not at the edge of everything. He shifted, wincing slightly. I'm offering you a way to keep that oath. To become who you were meant to be, not what others forced you to become. The offer hovered between them like early morning mist. Fragile, beautiful, dangerous to touch. Evelyn wanted it. The ache surprised her with its strength. But trust came hard after betrayal. What about Valor Blackrin? She asked. Your trouble doesn't end just because you survived. I'd be walking into a war. Thorn's smile carried the bite of winter wind. Maybe, he said. But I'd rather face a fight with someone like you beside me than with a dozen hired guns. Once Blackrin learns I'm alive, he may hesitate, or he may strike harder. He shrugged faintly. That's tomorrow's worry. Today, he added, studying her carefully, we focus on keeping you standing. You can't save anyone if hunger drops you first. Heat rose to her cheeks. I'm fine. Your bones held together by will, he said flatly. He nudged the remaining jerky toward her. Eat, doctor's orders. Despite herself, she almost smiled. You're not a doctor. No, he replied. But I recognize stubborn when I see it. Takes one to know one. His expression grew serious again. I'm not asking for an answer now. Just think on it. A new life, honest work, people who value what you can do. It's not charity, he said firmly. I need you. The ranch needs you. Hell's, the whole valley does. She took another piece of jerky, chewing slowly while her thoughts raced. A chance to heal again, to be useful, respected, to leave disgrace behind and build something new beneath these endless western skies. It felt too good to be real. In her experience, hope always carried a hidden price. But as she met Thorne Calderix's steady gaze, the truth etched into a face shaped by wind, loss, and endurance, she wondered if maybe the West truly lived by different laws, where worth was measured not by reputation, but by what a person chose to do when it mattered most. Where second chances grew like wildflowers after rain. I'll think about it, Evelyn Crowan said at last. Thorne Calderix nodded, clearly content with that. That's all I ask. He shifted slightly against the blankets. Now tell me about this place. How'd you end up here of all the forgotten corners in the territory? There's got to be a story behind it. Evelyn welcomed the change of subject. The weight of his offer pressed too heavily on her chest. As she spoke, she told him about stumbling across the abandoned prospector's cabin by chance, about the first nights she spent alone while wolves howled beyond the trees. As the words came, something between them loosened. Two survivors trading stories beside a struggling fire, sharing warmth that had nothing to do with flame. Outside, the sun climbed toward noon, casting golden shadow across the snow-draped peaks. The storm had passed cleanly, leaving sharp blue skies in its wake. Change lingered in the air, scented with pine and possibility. For the first time in months, Evelyn dared to hope. The first warning came at sunset on the third day. She had just finished replacing Thorne's bandages when she heard it. The distant whinny of a horse, cut short too quickly. She froze, her fingers still resting on fresh linen. Her eyes lifted to Thorne's. He had heard it too. Could be anyone, she whispered, though neither of them believed it. Could be, Thorne agreed grimly, his hand drifting toward the Colt revolver they'd kept within reach. But we'd best prepare for it not to be. They had spent 3 days quietly bracing for this moment. Thorne had regained strength faster than expected, able to sit, stand, even take a few careful steps. But fighting strength? Not even close. Evelyn moved to the shuttered window and peered through a narrow crack. The setting sun stained the snow a deep, blood-red hue. Long shadows stretched between the pines. At first, she saw nothing. Then movement. A flash of color that didn't belong to the forest. 3 riders, she breathed. Maybe 4. Coming up from the south trail. Thorne swore under his breath. Valor Blackrin's men, they're checking every shelter. He tried to rise, teeth clenched against pain. She pushed him gently back. You move like that, and you'll tear those stitches. Her mind raced, choices few, and none good. The root cellar, she said suddenly. Back corner, covered in snow. I'm not hiding while you face them alone. You're not facing anyone with a hole in your chest, she snapped. She helped him to his feet, bracing his weight against her shoulder. This isn't pride, Thorne. It's survival. If they find you, we're both dead. If they only find me, she continued, they'll want answers. And Blackrin's men aren't known for asking kindly. Her jaw set. Then I'll be very convincing in my ignorance. Now move. We don't have time to argue. The root cellar was cramped, barely large enough for a man to crouch. She'd discovered it during her second week in the cabin, half collapsed and filled with rot. She'd cleared it out without ever imagining she'd use it like this. Thorne resisted every step, but weakness betrayed him. By the time they reached the cellar, sweat beaded his brow despite the cold. She eased him down carefully, pressed his revolver into his hand, and passed him a canteen. "If they find me, if things turn bad, you stay hidden," she ordered. "No heroics. Evelyn, promise me." His gray eyes burned with frustration, but he nodded once. "Don't let them inside if you can help it. And be careful." She lowered the cellar door, swept snow over it, and hurried back to the cabin. Her hands shook as she erased every trace of his presence. Bloodied bandages went into the fire. His boots vanished behind her trunk. The spare blanket was folded and hidden. She scattered her medical tools to make them appear old, unused. The knock came just as she finished. 3 hard raps, sharp, impatient, confident. Evelyn drew a slow breath, shaped her face into weary suspicion, and opened the door only a crack. 3 men stood outside, trail-worn and cold-eyed. The leader was thin, pale-eyed, with a drooping mustache. He tipped his hat with mocking courtesy. "Evenin', ma'am. Name's Drask Halvin. These here are my associates, Cor Bale and Ven Ashrick." "Good evening," Evelyn replied, not widening the door. "What can I do for you, gentlemen?" Halvin's smile never touched his eyes. "We're looking for someone. Man got himself shot a few days back. Might have come seeking shelter around here. Big fellow," he continued casually. "Dark hair, riding a bay stallion with white stockings. Haven't seen anyone like that." Evelyn let fear slip into her voice. Not difficult, given the moment. "I don't get many visitors," she said. "Not this far up." "That's so?" Halvin leaned closer, peering past her shoulder toward the firelight. "Mind if we step inside? Warm ourselves a spell." The night seemed to hold its breath. "It's been a cold day of searching," Drask Halvin said mildly. "I'd rather you didn't make this difficult." "I'd rather you didn't come in," Evelyn Crowan replied. "A woman alone has to be careful." "Smart thinking." Halvin's pale eyes swept over her worn dress and hollowed cheeks, "though you don't look like you've got much worth taking. How long you been staying in old Jeb's place?" "Since autumn, and I'm not squatting." Her voice stiffened. "Jeb Miller was my uncle. He left me the cabin when he died." The lie slid out smoothly. One she'd prepared long ago, knowing the prospector who built the place had no kin anyone could name. Halvin seemed to accept it, though suspicion lingered in his stare. "Your uncle, huh?" Cor Bale, thick-necked with scarred knuckles, spat tobacco juice into the snow. "Funny, old Jeb never mentioned no niece." "Didn't mention much after that rock slide took him neither," Halvin added. "We weren't close," Evelyn said tightly. "But blood is blood." "Indeed it is." Halvin straightened. "Well, ma'am, I'd hate to think you're lying to us. See, the man we're hunting is dangerous. Shot a friend of ours in cold blood. Stole money meant for honest folk. If someone's been hiding him..." His smile thinned. "That'd make them an accessory to murder." Evelyn's eyes widened just enough. "Murder? I haven't seen anyone, I swear. It's just me and my horse up here." "Your horse?" Ven Ashrick, silent until now, spoke up. Younger than the others, restless as a hound straining at leash. "Didn't see no horse when we rode in." Evelyn's pulse hammered, but her voice stayed steady. "She's in the lean-to out back. Old mare, not much to look at. But she's all I've got." Halvin studied her a long moment, then nodded slightly. Ashrik circled behind the cabin, while Bale shifted to a position where he could watch both Evelyn and the tree line. They'd done this before. Many times. Ashrik returned, shaking his head. Just an old nag, like she said. But boss, he held something up. Evelyn's blood turned to ice, a strip of cloth, dark with dried blood. She'd missed one of the bandages. Halvin's posture changed instantly. His hand dropped toward his gun. Now that's interesting. He held the cloth between two fingers. You care to explain why there's bloody rags in your wood pile? Her thoughts raced. I cut myself. Chopping wood. Happens when you're alone. No one to help. Show me. What? The cut, Halvin said calmly. Show me where you bled enough to soak that much cloth. Evelyn held out her hands, scarred, calloused, nicked with old cuts. But nothing that explained the blood. Halvin's smile turned sharp. Ma'am, I think you'd best invite us inside after all. We need a more thorough talk about your recent visitors. Before she could answer, he shoved past her into the cabin. Bale followed. Ashrik closed the door behind them with final, deliberate force. The small room shrank instantly with 3 armed men inside. Nice place, Halvin said conversationally, eyes cataloging everything. Cozy. Must get lonely up here. He glanced at her. Might make a woman grateful for company, even the wrong kind. I told you, Evelyn said, fear tightening her chest. I haven't seen anyone. Halvin lifted the iron poker from beside the hearth, testing its weight. You know what I think? He turned slowly. I think Thorn Calderix crawled up here bleeding like a stuck hog. And you took pity on him. Women do that, he continued softly. Tender hearts and all, patched him up, maybe sent him on his way. That sound about right? I don't know any Thorn Calderix. Halvin moved faster than she expected. The poker sliced past her face and smashed into the wall. Evelyn stumbled backward, breath ripping from her chest. Don't lie to me, he snapped, civility cracking to reveal the violence beneath. We tracked him this far. His horse's prints led straight up this mountain before the snow buried them. He leaned close. This is the only shelter for miles. Then he must have passed by, Evelyn forced out, or died in the storm. The fire popped sharply, and somewhere beneath the floor, hidden beneath snow and silence, Thorn Calderix waited, listening to every word. I told you, Evelyn Crowan said hoarsely. I've seen no one. Drask Halvin studied her for a long moment, pale eyes unreadable. Then he nodded once toward Cor Bale. The stocky man began a slow, deliberate search of the cabin, kicking aside her stool, overturning her crate, prying at loose boards with the toe of his boot. Evelyn watched her few miserable possessions scatter across the dirt floor, anger rising to choke out fear. Even if this Calderix man had come here, she said coldly, what makes you think I'd tell you? You force your way into my home, threaten me, tear apart what little I own. Halvin struck her without warning. The back of his hand caught her face and sent her crashing to the floor. Light burst behind her eyes as her cheeks slammed into the hard earth. What makes me think you'll talk? He said calmly. Because you're smart enough to know what happens to women who cross Valor Blackrin. Blood filled her mouth. Her lip had split clean. Evelyn pushed herself upright slowly, shaking but unbroken, and met Halvin's stare with every ounce of defiance she had left. I'm a healer, she said. If someone came to me wounded, I'd help them. That's who I am. A healer? Halvin laughed. Out here? His gaze slid over her thin frame. What are you really? Some worn-out whore past her value? Or maybe you killed old Jeb yourself, took his claim, found something worth hiding? Boss, Van Ashrick said suddenly. He held up a shirt, a man's shirt, the one Evelyn had forgotten, hanging behind the stove to dry. It bore no blood, but it was unmistakably male. Broad shoulders, long sleeves, far too large for her. Halvin's eyes gleamed. Well now, and whose shirt might that be? He tilted his head. Your uncle's? Funny thing is, Jeb Miller was a small man. He stepped closer. That shirt would fit someone about Thorne Calderix's size. Evelyn's mind went blank. There was no lie left that would save her. Her gaze flicked toward the door, calculating distance, timing, prayer. Don't, Halvin said softly. He drew his gun and leveled it at her chest with lazy precision. Now you're going to tell us where Calderix went, he said, or things are about to get real unpleasant. Bale cracked his knuckles, grinning. I got a real gift for making folks talk. His eyes slid over her. Been a while since I had a woman scream. True terror flooded Evelyn then. Not hunger, not disgrace, not cold, but the raw violence that lived beyond law and mercy. Last chance, Halvin said. Where's Calderix? Evelyn lifted her chin, heart hammering. Go to hell. Halvin sighed. Bale, show the lady what happens when... The gunshot tore through the cabin like thunder. Bale jerked sideways, screaming, his shoulder erupting in blood. The door burst open. Thorne Calderix stood in the doorway, ashen-faced, barely upright, but holding his Colt rock-steady. Step away from the lady, he said. Calderix! Halvin spun. You're supposed to be... The second shot shattered Halvin's gun hand. His weapon clattered across the floor as he screamed, clutching mangled fingers. Ashrick lunged for his own pistol. But Evelyn moved first. She grabbed the iron poker and swung with everything she had. It connected with Ashrick's knee in a sickening crack, dropping him howling. Everyone stay exactly where you are, Thorne commanded. The effort was costing him. Evelyn could already see dark blood spreading through his shirt where stitches had torn. But his aim never wavered. Miss Crowan, he said tightly, would you kindly collect their weapons? She didn't hesitate, scooping up guns, knives, anything sharp, while the three men groaned and cursed on the floor. Thorne's hand trembled now. You can't kill us all, Halvin gasped. Blackrin will send more. He'll burn your ranch to the ground. Maybe, Thorne said evenly, but you won't be there to see it. His voice hardened. You touched her. That was your last mistake. Halvin's eyes widened. Wait, we can make a deal. The only deal you get is this, Thorne said. You live, you leave, tonight. He gestured with the gun. Ride back to Valor Blackrin. Tell him I'm alive. Tell him I'm ready. And if he sends one more man after me or mine, Thorne finished, eyes cold as winter iron, I'll come for him myself. You expect us to ride like this? Bale panted, gesturing at his bleeding shoulder. You rode up here ready to torture a woman, Thorne replied. Count yourself lucky I'm not returning the favor. He exhaled sharply. Evelyn, there's rope in my saddlebags. They bound the outlaws tightly, Evelyn using her healer's knowledge to secure the knots firm without cutting circulation. And even then, despite everything, she cleaned their wounds. Old habits, she realized, never truly died. You're wasting kindness, Thorne Calderix muttered as Evelyn Crowan wrapped Drask Halvin's ruined hand. No, Evelyn said firmly. I'm choosing who I want to be. By the time they forced the three men onto their horses, and sent them riding south under hard warnings. Full darkness had settled over the mountains. Thorn barely made it back inside the cabin before his legs failed. He collapsed just beyond the threshold. "Damn fool," Evelyn scolded, catching him before his head struck the floor. She dragged him toward the rough bed she'd finally managed to build from pine planks and rope. "I told you to stay hidden. I heard Halvin hit you," Thorn growled through clenched teeth. "Nobody lays a hand on you while I'm breathing." The fury in his voice warmed something deep inside her, something she'd thought long frozen beyond recovery. She pushed the feeling aside and focused on his chest. His stitches had torn again. Blood seeped fresh through the linen. Using the last of the good whiskey, she cleaned the wound carefully. "We can't stay here," she said quietly. "They know where I am now. Even if Halvin didn't return, Valor Blackrin would send others." "Then you'll come with me tonight," Thorn said. "A storm's moving in. It'll cover our tracks." He caught her wrist. "I'm sorry, Evelyn. I brought this danger to your door." "No." She squeezed his fingers gently. "You brought purpose back into my life. That's worth any risk." As she worked to repair the damage, she realized she meant it. For months she had been slowly dying in this cabin. Body wasting, spirit fading. Thorn Calderix had crashed into her solitude like spring-breaking winter's grip, reminding her who she truly was. A healer. A fighter. A woman who refused to bend. Outside, the first snowflakes drifted down, covering blood and violence beneath a clean white hush. Inside, as they prepared for flight, two wounded souls found warmth in shared resolve, and the first stirrings of something deeper than gratitude or need. Something that, given time and trust, might grow into love. The storm struck hard as they left the cabin behind. Evelyn had fashioned a travois from pine branches and rope, knowing Thorn couldn't ride 15 miles in his condition. He'd argued until fresh blood soaked his shirt and ended the debate. "This is humiliating," he muttered as she helped him onto the makeshift stretcher behind Ashen. "Better humiliated than dead," she replied, checking the knots one last time. She bundled him in every blanket they owned. The cold would be as deadly as any pursuit. "Besides," she added, mounting her mare and taking Ashen's lead rope, "you already played hero tonight. My turn." The horses picked their way through deepening snow. The travois left tracks that would vanish within hours. She'd never been more grateful for bad weather. They had gone perhaps 3 miles when Thorn's condition worsened. His skin burned with returning fever. His words dissolved into muttering, names and places she didn't recognize, fragments of memory or delirium. "We need shelter," Evelyn said, though she knew stopping could mean death if Halvin had lied about retreating. The temperature plunged fast. Thorn's shivering slowed, edging toward the dangerous stillness of hypothermia. "There," he rasped during a brief moment of clarity, pointing weakly toward a cluster of rocks. "Old mine shaft, used it in storms." She found the entrance half buried beneath snow and brush, more cave than tunnel, carved long ago by some forgotten prospector. It cut the wind and offered concealment. She led the horses inside, then dragged Thorn as far from the entrance as possible. By lantern light, she saw the truth. His wound had torn completely open, strained during his stand in the cabin. Fresh blood seeped through the bandages, the edges red and angry. "Should have stayed hidden," he murmured, catching her hand. "Couldn't let them hurt you." "Hush," Evelyn said softly, though his protectiveness struck her deeper than she expected. "Save your strength." She cleaned the wound again, packed it with a last clean cloth, and forced willow bark tea between his lips. But she knew it wasn't enough. Without proper medicine and rest, infection would take him before they ever reached his ranch. "Talk to me," Thorne said suddenly, gray eyes struggling to focus. "Need to stay awake." She paused. "About what?" "Before," he whispered. "When you were happy." Her hand stilled on the bandages. "Why?" "Because when you work," he said faintly, "you look like you're exactly where you belong. I want to know that woman." Evelyn swallowed and resumed her work. "I had a patient once," she began quietly. "A little girl named Emma, 7 years old, bright as a new penny. She fell from a roof," Evelyn continued, voice steady despite the ache of memory. "Broke her leg in 3 places. The doctors said she'd never walk right again," Evelyn Crowan said softly. "But I didn't believe them." "You didn't," Thorne Calderix murmured. "I knew she was a fighter," Evelyn continued, a faint smile touching her lips. "A lot like someone I've met recently." She stared into the lantern light, memory warming her voice. "I worked with her every day for months, exercises, stretching, encouragement when she wanted to quit. The doctors said I was wasting my time." "Let me guess," Thorne said weakly. "She proved them wrong." "She did." Evelyn's smile deepened, then faded. 6 months later, she ran straight past them, laughing like a lark. She must have had family proud of her. "They were poor," Evelyn said quietly. "Couldn't pay much. The hospital board said I spent too much time on charity cases. Said kindness didn't balance ledgers." She swallowed, but how could I turn her away? She trusted me to help her heal. Thorne's hand found hers, hot with fever, yet gentle. "That's the difference between you and them," he said. "You see people, not numbers." "And look where that got me," she replied softly. "Yes," he said, holding her gaze despite the pain. "Look where." She frowned. "Right where you were needed most," Thorne said. "If you'd been safe in Chicago, I'd be dead in the snow." Her throat tightened. Even burning with fever, fighting infection, he insisted on seeing her worth. When the world had spent months telling her she had none. "My turn," she said quickly, needing to shift the weight of the moment. "Tell me about your sister. Mara, right?" His expression softened instantly. "Mara. 5 years younger, 10 times smarter." He gave a weak chuckle. "When our parents died, everyone told me to send her east. Let relatives turn her into a proper lady. And she told them all to, well," his lips twitched. "She made her feelings very clear." Evelyn smiled despite herself. "She sounds formidable. You'll like her, and she'll like you." His eyes warmed. "Anyone who can pull a bullet from my chest and drop 3 outlaws with a poker. That's Mayara's kind of person." "I hardly dropped them," Evelyn said. "I mostly convinced Van Ashrick to rethink his life choices while I was about to faint." Thorne grimaced. "Some protector I turned out to be." "You came when I needed you," she said simply. "That's what matters." Silence settled between them, heavy and gentle all at once. Their hands remained linked while the storm howled beyond the rock walls. In the flickering lantern glow, Evelyn could almost pretend they were safe. That morning wouldn't bring new danger. "Evelyn," Thorne said quietly, "if something happens, nothing is going to happen. Listen to me," he insisted, grip tightening. "If I don't make it, you take my horse, my guns, everything. Ride to the Double M. Tell Bren Hollow what happened. He'll make sure you're protected. You're going to make it." But if I don't, he said faintly, I expect you to drag my body there yourself, just so you can tell my sister what a stubborn fool her brother was. Her voice cracked. You are not dying on my watch. She swallowed hard. I've lost too much already. I won't lose you too. The words hung between them, heavier with meaning than she'd intended. Thorn studied her face, seeing past exhaustion and fear into something raw and true. When I woke up in your cabin, he said softly, the first thing I saw was your face. Thought I'd died and somehow wandered into heaven. She huffed weakly. Angels probably eat better than hardtack and melted snow. Delirium doesn't cancel truth, he murmured. He lifted their joined hands and pressed his lips gently to her knuckles, a gesture both old-fashioned and deeply intimate. You saved more than my life, he said. You reminded me that good people still exist, even in hard places, especially in hard places. The moment stretched, fragile as spun glass. Evelyn leaned closer, drawn by something stronger than caution. And then Thorn's body convulsed with violent shivering. The fever, she said unnecessarily, pulling back to grab more blankets. Her cheeks burned, not from the cold. She worked through the night, fighting infection with stubborn will and whispered prayer. Thorn drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes clear, sometimes lost in memory. He spoke of his parents, taken by cholera when he was 19, of building the ranch from bare earth, of earning every acre through sweat and refusal to quit, and of the drought tightening its grip on the valley. Water rights, he murmured during one lucid moment. Everything comes down to water. If Vylor Blackrin controls the stream, he controls the valley, charges what he wants, drives out anyone who won't pay. But your rights are legal, Evelyn said. Legal doesn't matter if I'm dead, he replied bitterly. And Mara can't hold those rights alone, not without a husband to enforce them. His laugh was hollow. Blackrin's son's been circling her for months. Probably thinks marrying her's easier than killing us both. Evelyn's stomach twisted at the cold calculation of it. The war wasn't just about land. It was about power, and it was far from over. Your sister doesn't strike me as the kind of woman who'd marry under pressure, Evelyn Crowan said quietly. She would, Thorn Calderix replied. If it meant saving the ranch, saving the families who depend on us. His jaw tightened. That's why I have to live. I can't let her sacrifice herself for my failure. You haven't failed anyone. Haven't I? His voice roughened. I got myself shot, dragged killers to your door, and now I'm bleeding out in a cave while Valor Blackrin moves in on everything I built. You're not dying, Evelyn said firmly. And when we reach your ranch, we'll face whatever comes. Together? Thorn searched her face. Together, she said without hesitation. You offered me a place, remember? His brow furrowed. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She touched his cheek gently, feeling the heat of fever beneath her palm. I've been running for months, Thorn. From what happened. From who I used to be. Her voice softened. These past days. Fighting beside you, saving your life. I remembered something. I'm tired of hiding. Tired of being alone. He closed his hand over hers. You won't be alone again. Not if I have anything to say about it. This time, when she leaned close, he met her halfway. The kiss was gentle, hesitant, two wounded souls finding shelter in one another. It tasted of willow bark and winter air, of fear and hope tangled together. When they parted, His eyes seemed clearer. "That," he murmured, "is better medicine than anything in your bag." "Flatterer," she said. But she smiled. The first real smile she'd worn in months. "Rest now," Evelyn whispered. "Dawn isn't far, and we move the moment the storm breaks." She settled beside him beneath the blankets, her head resting against his shoulder. Outside, the blizzard still howled, but within their small refuge, something fragile and precious took root. "Evelyn?" Thorne's voice was sleepy, warm. "Yes?" "When this is over, when Blackrin's dealt with and the ranch is safe." He hesitated. "Would you consider, well, would you let me court you properly?" Her heart skipped. "Mr. Calderix," she said softly, "are you proposing a future proposal?" "Maybe," he said faintly. "Would that be so terrible?" She thought of disgrace, of months of isolation, of being cast aside. Then she thought of his steady gray eyes, his unwavering protection, the way he saw her worth when she had forgotten it herself. "No," she whispered. "It wouldn't be terrible at all." They slept in broken stretches as the storm spent its fury. Two battered souls finding peace simply by breathing beside one another. When dawn finally came, painting the cave mouth in rose and gold, Evelyn examined his wound. The redness had faded. The fever was gone. Weak but clear-eyed. "Ready to go home?" she asked. Thorne squeezed her hand. In that simple gesture lived promises of safety, belonging, and something deeper still. "Ready." They emerged into a world reborn beneath snow. Silent, untouched, gleaming. Ahead lay the Double M Ranch, and all the danger waiting there. For now, they had each other. It was enough. It was everything. The ranch appeared through the white like something torn from a dream, or a nightmare. Evelyn felt dread coil in her stomach. No smoke rose from the chimneys. No figures moved in the yard. Too still. "Something's wrong," Thorne muttered, forcing himself straighter despite her protest. He'd insisted on riding the last 5 miles, though the effort clearly cost him. "Too quiet," he said. "Bren always has the men out early." They approached slowly, Thorne checking his Colt, Evelyn gripping the rifle taken from Drask Halvin's men. The main house stood solid, untouched, but the barn doors hung open, creaking in the wind. "Mara," Thorne called. "Mara." His voice cracked. "Bren, anyone?" A figure appeared in the doorway, a young woman with Thorne's dark hair and the same stubborn chin, shotgun raised with practiced ease. Relief flooded her face when she recognized him. "Thorne, thank God." Mara Crowan ran down the steps, her composure breaking. "We thought you were dead," Blackrin's men said. She stopped short, eyes flicking to Evelyn. "And who is this?" "The woman who saved my life," Thorne said simply. "Mara, this is Evelyn Crowan." Then, with a faint smirk, "Lower the shotgun before you shoot someone we like." Mayera studied Evelyn closely. Her worn clothes, the medical satchel, the way she stayed protectively near Thorne. Then she smiled. Warm. Immediate. "Then I owe you more than I can ever say." She moved to help her brother dismount and gasped when she saw the blood staining his shirt. "You're hurt." "I'm alive," he said. "That's what matters. Where is everyone? Where's Bren?" Mayera's expression darkened, and in that silence, Evelyn knew. The real battle had only just begun. "Scattered," Mara Crowan said tightly. "Valor Blackrin rode in 2 days ago with 20 men and a judge's order. Claimed you were dead. Said the water rights reverted to the territory without a male heir. Gave us 48 hours to clear out. That's not how the law works, Evelyn Crowan said, supporting Thorne Calderix's weight as they moved. It does when you own the judge, Mara replied bitterly. Bren Hollow took most of the hands into town, trying to find a lawyer not already in Blackrin's pocket. The rest are pushing cattle north, away from the stream. I stayed behind to guard what I could. They helped Thorne inside. The house told its own story. Windows barricaded with furniture, ammunition lined neatly along the mantel, sacks of flour and dried meat stacked like fortifications. Mayera had been preparing for war. Let me see that wound, she said. I'm a nurse. Evelyn cut in, guiding Thorne to the kitchen table and opening her medical bag. Well, I was. The infection's improving, but he needs rest and real care. Myra watched her hands closely. You're not just any nurse, she said quietly. Those are a surgeon's hands. I had good training, Evelyn replied, not looking up as she cleaned the wound with supplies far better than anything she'd had in the cabin. Thankfully, Mayera didn't press. Tell me about this judge's order, Thorne growled through clenched teeth. Judge Ormond Valak rode out with Blackrin himself, Mara said. Claimed you died intestate. Said water rights can't pass to a woman alone. Blackrin generously offered to buy the ranch for 1/10 of its worth. Her jaw hardened. Or his son Ryan Blackrin would marry me and manage the property. Over my dead body, Thorne snapped. That was rather the idea. Thorne's gaze sharpened. Mayera, we need those documents. The ones in Father's old desk, the papers he told us to keep safe. Her eyes widened. The original water grant? I tried. The desk's locked. I could never find the key. Because it's not in the desk, Thorne said grimly. 3rd stone from the left in the root cellar. Father showed me before he died. Made me swear never to tell unless this happened. Mayera bolted from the room. She returned minutes later with a small metal box, dirt still clinging to its seams. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, were documents that made Evelyn inhale sharply. These predate the territorial government, she said, scanning the pages. Spanish land grant, transferred legally through Mexican authority into American ownership. And here, water rights granted in perpetuity to the Calderix family and their heirs, regardless of gender. Father always said our rights were ironclad, Thorne murmured. But will it matter? Blackrin owns the judge. He doesn't own the federal marshal in Denver, Evelyn said slowly. These fall under federal jurisdiction. Telegraph the marshal's office. Send copies of everything. Mayera stared at her. You know federal law? I dealt with lawyers in Chicago, Evelyn said quietly, eyes still on the papers. Mayera studied her a moment, then nodded. Your past is your business. What matters is you're here, and you're helping. That's enough for me. Hooves thundered outside. They turned toward the window. Riders, at least a dozen, charging hard. At their front rode Valor Blackrin, silver hair catching the light. They're early, Mara muttered, reaching for her shotgun. No, Thorne said, struggling upright. I'll meet them. You can barely stand, Evelyn protested. Then I'll lean on you. His eyes met hers, steady, trusting. Both of you, we face this together. They stepped onto the porch as the riders reined in. Thorne stood between the two women, shoulders squared despite the pain Evelyn felt trembling beneath her grip. Blackrin smiled coldly from his saddle. Well now, Thorne Calderix, risen from the dead. His gaze swept him, though not far from returning there by the looks of you. Sorry to disappoint, Thorne replied evenly. As you can see, reports of my death were greatly exaggerated. No matter. Blackrin gestured toward a thin, nervous man in a black coat. Judge Valak has already ruled. A ruling based on false information, Avlin said, stepping forward. Mr. Calderix is clearly alive. That makes your judgment invalid. Blackrin's eyes narrowed, assessing her. And who might you be? Avalyn Crowan, she said steadily. His medical advisor and a legal witness to his continued breathing. Judge Valak flushed. Legal witness? He snapped. Avalyn didn't flinch. Yes, she said. And this conversation is far from over. You're no lawyer. No, Avalyn Crowan replied calmly. But I can read. She lifted the documents higher. Spanish land grant, 1823. Mexican confirmation, 1841. American territorial acceptance, 1851. Water rights assigned to the Calderix family, all heirs, not only male ones, granted in perpetuity. Let me see those, Judge Orman Valak snapped, reaching forward. Avalyn stepped back. I don't think so. These papers are being sent to the federal marshal, along with a full statement regarding attempted murder, fraud, and judicial corruption. You can't prove any of that, Phalor Blackrin said sharply, though doubt flickered behind his eyes. Can't I? Thorne Calderix said coldly. Your men already talked. Drask Halvin, Cor Bale, and Ven Ashrick were quite descriptive about who paid them to kill me. It was a lie. But Blackrin didn't know that. His hand slid instinctively toward his revolver. I wouldn't, Mara Crowan said mildly, her shotgun never wavering. At this distance, I won't miss. Blackrin's polite mask cracked. You're making a serious mistake. I have influence, power. You can't fight me and win. Maybe not, Thorne answered. But we can make it expensive. He glanced toward the ranch beyond. Every family in this valley knows what you've been doing. Push us far enough and they'll stand together. Even your bought judge can't rule against everyone. And there's another problem, Avalyn added quietly. Your son, Ryan Blackrin, the one you intended to marry to Mayara. I treated him last spring. You called it exhaustion. Her gaze sharpened. But opium addiction has a look. How long before he gambles away everything you've stolen? Blackrin went pale. You're lying. Room 12, Avalyn said evenly. Garnet Hotel in Martinez, Tuesdays and Fridays. The proprietor keeps meticulous records. The details were a calculated gamble, but Blackrin's reaction told her everything. This isn't finished, he snarled. Yes, it is, came a voice from behind. Hooves thundered into the yard. Bren Hollow rode in hard, grinning wide. Beside him stood a man wearing a federal badge, followed by armed deputies. Sorry we're late, Bren said. Took some convincing to pull Marshal Corvin Ash out of Denver. But those telegraph messages Miss Mara sent caught his attention. The marshal dismounted, eyes sharp and assessing. Judge Valak, he said coolly, I'll need you to come with me. There are questions regarding your recent rulings. This is absurd, Valak protested. I have authority. In territorial matters, the marshal replied. Not in federal land and water rights that predate the territory. He examined the documents Avalyn handed over, nodding slowly. These appear valid. Any ruling against them would be highly irregular. Blackrin made one last attempt. Thorne, be sensible. The drought is worsening. Work with me, we both profit. Fight me, and everyone suffers. I work with people who deal fair, Thorne said. You tried to have me murdered, threatened my sister. Tried to steal what my family built with blood and sweat. His voice hardened. So no, Blackrin. No deals. The marshal gestured to his deputies. Mr. Blackrin, you'll come as well. Conspiracy to commit murder warrants investigation. As they were led away, Blackrin cast a final venomous look at Evelyn. You'll regret this, woman. I doubt it, she answered calmly. I don't forget either. When the dust finally settled, Bren clasped Thorne's hand, laughing in relief. Damn good seeing you breathing, boss. We feared the worst. Nearly was, Thorne said. Would have been without her. His arm slid around Evelyn's waist, drawing her close. Bren, this is Evelyn Crowan. She'll be staying on as our medical advisor and anything else she chooses to be. Myra smiled knowingly. Anyone who can face down Valor Blackrin with nothing but papers and nerve belongs here. Warmth spread through Evelyn's chest, not just from Thorne's touch, but from something deeper, belonging. The Calderix Ranch wasn't just land, it was family, purpose, a second beginning. There's still work ahead, Bren warned. Blackrin won't quit easy, and that drought's only getting worse. Then we'd best get started, Thorne said, exhaling. But first, I need a bed before I hit the ground. He gave Bren a tired grin. And send word to the valley. We're calling a water meeting. Time we stopped fighting each other and started standing together. As they guided him back inside, Evelyn Crowan gently caught Myra Crowan's arm. That information you shared about Ryan Blackrin earlier? Thank you, she said quietly. The hotel part was a complete bluff, but it worked. Myra squeezed her fingers. You're already family, Evelyn, and we protect our own. Looking around the room, at faces that had accepted her without suspicion, people who measured her by courage and skill rather than rumors or past failure, Evelyn felt the final defenses around her heart give way. She hadn't only found safety in this hard land, she had found home, and she would defend it with everything she possessed. The water meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon, giving ranchers across the valley time to reach the Calderix place. In the days leading up to it, Evelyn settled fully into the household, converting a spare bedroom into a modest clinic. Her focus wasn't only on Thorne Calderix's recovery, but on the quiet suffering carried by the ranch hands. You've got healing hands, miss, Eldrick Warren said one afternoon, wincing as she wrapped his swollen knees. That liniment of yours works better than anything Doc Holcomb ever poured on me. Evelyn smiled. Just a different way of looking at pain, Mr. Warren. Sometimes the old remedies know things we forgot. Word traveled fast. By Saturday, riders came steadily through the yard. Women carrying feverish infants, children with lungs rattling from stubborn coughs, men with injuries ignored too long until infection crept in. Evelyn treated them all, refusing payment no matter how strongly they insisted. She's building something, Mara murmured to Thorne as they watched from the window. A young mother left in tears of relief, medicine clutched tight against her chest. Trust, Mara added. Goodwill. Everything Valor Blackrin keeps tearing apart. Thorne nodded, pride softening his tired face. She doesn't even realize she's doing it. That's just who she is. Sunday dawned sharp and clear. By noon, wagons crowded the yard and riders lined the fence rails. Evelyn helped Thorne into his clean shirt and vest, insisting he use a walking stick despite his protests. I can't look weak in front of them, he argued. You'll look worse if you collapse, she replied calmly. Pride doesn't heal wounds, Thorne Calderix. The main room had been cleared. Benches and chairs were arranged tightly together. Evelyn recognized many faces from her clinic and noticed the quiet nods of respect sent her way. Whatever her past had been, these people judged her by what she had done here. Thorne called the meeting to order, standing tall despite the cane. "Friends, neighbors, thank you for coming. We all know why we're here. This drought threatens everything we've built, and men like Black Rin would turn that desperation into a weapon." Low murmurs of agreement spread through the room. "But I didn't call you here just to speak against him," Thorne continued. "I called you here to speak for something better. Cooperation, shared sacrifice, survival for all, not profit for a few." "Fine words," Talon Rusk called out. "But Black Rin controls half the water in this valley. What choice do we have?" "The choice to work together," Evelyn said, rising. Several heads turned sharply. Women rarely spoke at gatherings like this. "I've studied the water flow," she continued steadily. "The stream feeding the Calderic's ranch and several others comes from 3 mountain springs that merge upstream." She stepped to the rough map Myra had helped her draw. "You're all drawing independently, often at the same hours, draining the flow before it reaches those below. But if you coordinate schedules, reinforce the banks, even build retention ponds during spring melt, the same water could serve everyone." "And who are you to lecture us about water?" Brankrell demanded, arms crossed. Years of feuds had hardened him. "Someone who's seen cooperation save lives," Evelyn replied evenly. "In Chicago hospitals, when supplies ran low, we shared, coordinated, adapted. The principle is the same. Work together or watch everything die one by one." "She's right," Bren Hollow said firmly. "I've said for years we need to think smarter, not just fight harder." The room erupted, some voices hopeful, others doubtful. Thorne let the noise run its course before lifting his hand. "There's more," he said. "Black Rin's methods only work if we face him alone. Together, we have power too. Economic power, political power, and the strength of being right." "He owns Judge Ormond Valak," someone shouted. "But he doesn't own the federal courts," Evelyn added. "And he doesn't own the newspapers in Denver or San Francisco. Public attention matters. A story about wealthy men stealing water from struggling families during a drought would bring scrutiny even Black Rin can't afford." Understanding spread slowly across the room. They had been thinking small, local. The wider world offered leverage they'd never considered. The meeting stretched on for hours as ideas formed, arguments softened, and plans began to take shape. They would create a Valley Water Association, representatives from every ranch, shared oversight, shared defense. And for the first time in a long while, hope took root where fear had ruled. Water draws would be carefully timed and overseen. Resources would be shared to dig retention ponds and reinforce the stream banks before spring runoff. Most important of all, they would stand together against anyone who tried to drive them off their land. "And what about medical care?" Selma Virex asked suddenly. Her baby slept bundled against her chest, the same child Evelyn had treated days earlier. "Doc Holcomb charges more than most of us can pay, and half the time he doesn't even show." The room quieted. Every gaze turned toward Evelyn Crowan. She felt Thorne Calderix's hand settle lightly at her arm, steady, encouraging. "I'm not a doctor," she said carefully, "but I do have training and experience. I'd be willing to hold regular clinics, treat what I can, and help arrange transport for serious cases." She paused, thinking. In return, perhaps a small contribution from each family. Money, supplies, labor, whatever you're able. The response was immediate. Voices overlapped with agreement. Within minutes, They decided to convert an abandoned line shack into a proper clinic. Families volunteered lumber, tools, and time. As the crowd began to thin, people shaking hands, already making plans, an unexpected rider approached. Ryan Blackrin, Vylor's son, came in alone, both hands raised as he dismounted slowly. "I come in peace," he called out. "May I speak with you, Thorn Calderix, and Miss Crowan?" Thorn stiffened, but Evelyn caught something in the young man's face. Panic, exhaustion, not aggression. "Let him talk," she murmured. They met on the porch, Myra Crowan standing guard with her shotgun ready. Up close, Ryan looked worse than before. His fine clothes hung loose on a body worn thin by sickness. "My father doesn't know I'm here," he said quickly. "If he did, it wouldn't go well. But I had to warn you." "Warn us about what?" Thorn asked coldly. Ryan's hand shook as he reached for a flask, then stopped himself and let it fall back into his pocket. "He's not finished. The federal marshal slowed him, but he's hiring others. Professionals from Texas, men who'll make Drask Halvin's group look harmless." "Why tell us?" Evelyn asked softly. She studied him with a healer's eye. The tremor, the hollow skin, the restless fear. Addiction, yes. But something else too. "Because I'm tired of being his weapon," Ryan blurted. "You were right, Miss Crowan. About the opium. About everything. He's used my weakness to control me for years." His voice cracked. "He promised if I married Myra, he'd send me east for treatment. But I know better. He'd never let me go. I'd be his puppet forever, and she'd be trapped too." The pain in his words was real. Evelyn felt a surge of unexpected sympathy. "What do you want from us?" Myra asked, lowering the shotgun just slightly. "Nothing," Ryan said quickly. "I only wanted to do one decent thing. He plans to strike during the spring roundup when your men are scattered. Burn the barn, poison the water source, make it look like accidents." "When?" Thorn demanded. 2 weeks, maybe 3. The men are still riding north." Ryan swayed, then steadied himself. "I should go. If he learns I came—" "Wait," Evelyn said. He turned back. "The treatment you need, it's real. Painful, hard, but possible. I've helped others through it." Hope flickered across his face, then fear crushed it again. "My father would never allow." "He doesn't have to know," she said firmly. "When you're ready, truly ready, come find me." Ryan studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. "Thank you," he said hoarsely. "All of you. And I'm sorry. For everything my family's done." He rode off fast, leaving silence behind. "Could be a trap," Bren Hollow muttered from the doorway. "Maybe," Thorn agreed. But that boy's suffering was real. He turned to Evelyn. "What do you think?" "I think addiction makes people desperate enough to betray even cruel fathers," she said quietly. "And I think we prepare for the worst while hoping for the best." They spent the next week fortifying the ranch. The Water Rights Association proved its worth immediately. Neighboring ranches sent men to stand watch, turning the Calderix place into a stronghold built on unity. Evelyn organized medical supplies for potential casualties, teaching Myra and others the basics of field treatment. "You've done this before," Myra observed, as Evelyn demonstrated how to pack a gunshot wound. "Chicago had its own wars," Evelyn replied. "Different weapons, same rules." Thorn recovered steadily under her care. The infection finally broke. Between preparations, they stole small moments. Quiet talks by the fire. Slow walks along the stream where he spoke of his plans for the land. kisses that carried promises neither dared speak aloud. "When this is over," he said one evening, drawing her close, "I want to do this right. Court you properly." "I'm no lady," Evelyn protested softly. "I'm a disgraced nurse who—" He silenced her with a kiss. "You're the woman who saved my life," he said, "who stood beside me when everything was against us, who's healing an entire valley. That makes you the finest lady I know." She smiled against his mouth. "Sweet talker." "Just a man who knows what he wants," he replied. "And what I want is you, today, tomorrow, and every day after." The attack came at dawn on the 10th day. Not the assault they'd expected, but something quieter. Evelyn woke to the sharp scent of smoke and frantic shouting. "The grain stores!" someone cried. "Fire in the grain stores!" They ran outside to see flames crawling up the feed building as men scrambled to form a bucket line. Thorne caught Evelyn's arm. "This is a diversion," he said grimly. "They're after something else." His instinct proved right. While most hands battled the flames, riders swept in from the north, moving not toward the house, but straight for the stream. "The water!" Mara Crowan shouted, lifting her rifle. "They've got barrels, poison!" What followed dissolved into pure chaos. Gunfire cracked across the valley as the defenders of the Double M rushed to intercept. Smoke mixed with shouted commands and pounding hooves. Evelyn Crowan found herself no longer only a healer, but a fighter. She raised the rifle Thorne Calderix had taught her to use, her hands steady despite the fear in her chest. She fired when she had to, protected when she could. The fight was violent, but short. Once the attackers lost surprise, they broke. Valor Blackrin's hired guns fled, leaving several wounded behind. Evelyn's conscience would not let her turn away. As she knelt beside one man clutching his bleeding shoulder, he snarled, "You're wasting kindness. Blackrin will just hire more." "Perhaps," Evelyn said calmly as she tied off the bandage. "Or perhaps word will spread that the Double M shows mercy, even to enemies." She met his eyes. "Which ranch would you rather work for someday? One that shoots wounded men, or one that heals them?" He had no answer. By full daylight, the damage was clear. The grain store was badly burned, but salvageable. No poison had reached the water. Most importantly, no one from their side had been killed. Several bullet wounds were treated swiftly by Evelyn's hands. "They'll be back," Thorne said grimly. "Let them come," Bren Hollow replied. "We held today. We'll hold tomorrow." Hordalster, but it was Ryan Blackrin who arrived with the true turning point. He rode in at sunset, pale but determined, holding a bundle of papers that made Thorne whistle softly. "My father's correspondence," Ryan said. "Letters to the hired men, names, dates, payments, enough to see him jailed or hanged." "Why?" Myra asked quietly. Ryan met her gaze without flinching. "Because Miss Crowan was right. I want to be free." He swallowed hard. "And maybe worthy of forgiveness someday." Evelyn stepped forward. "The offer still stands. Treatment, support, a chance at a different life." She searched his face. "But only if you're truly ready." "I am," Ryan said. And this time, she believed him. The papers were telegraphed to Marshal Corvinash that very night. By the end of the week, Valor Blackrin was taken into federal custody. His empire collapsed as allies fled from scandal and indictment. The Water Rights Association assumed temporary control of his holdings, ensuring no single man could ever again threaten the valley's survival. Justice came not through revenge, but through courage, through unity, through the redemption of a broken young man who chose truth over blood. And at the center of it all, two wounded souls found healing in one another's presence, building something new from the ashes of winter. Spring arrived early that year. Wildflowers spread across the valley in purple and gold. The old line shack had been transformed into a proper clinic. Whitewashed walls, wide windows, sunlight pouring in. Evelyn stood in the doorway, watching families arrive for medical day, her heart fuller than she'd ever believed possible during those desperate months in the cabin. Quite a change from that drafty shack, Thorne said gently behind her. He was fully healed now, only a slight stiffness and cold weather reminding them how close death had come. Everything's changed, Evelyn murmured, leaning back into his warmth. Sometimes I can hardly believe it's real. Believe it, he said, kissing her temple. You didn't just heal bodies here, Evelyn. You healed hope. The clinic became the heart of the valley. Women received care they'd never known. Children were treated before sickness turned deadly. Knowledge once locked in distant cities now lived here, shared freely. Even Ryan Blackrin, 3 months into his painful recovery, worked quietly keeping records and learning basic medical skills. Miss Crowan! Little Emma Hartley ran up with a bundle of wildflowers. Mama says these'll make the clinic smell pretty. Evelyn accepted them with a smile, thinking of another Emma long ago in Chicago, a child who'd learned to walk again. Perhaps healing always traveled in circles. Thank you, sweetheart. How's that cough? All gone. The honey medicine worked perfect. As the girl skipped away, Mayra stepped outside. Ryan finished organizing the shelves, she said. He's meticulous when he's clear-headed. He's doing well, Evelyn replied softly. Purpose helps. Mayra smiled, then added, Speaking of purpose, Thorne says he wants to show you something important. Evelyn found him by the stream, near the bend shaded by cottonwoods. The place where they often walked at dusk, planning the future of the ranch and the water system that now served the entire valley together. You wanted to show me something? She asked. Thorne turned, eyes warm and nervous in a way she had never seen before. Something. He turned, and Evelyn caught her breath at the look on his face, nervous, resolute, and unbearably tender all at once. I do. I truly do. Then he lifted a hand before she could speak. Evelyn, please, let me finish. He took her hands, his calloused thumbs brushing gently over her palms. 6 months ago, I was bleeding out in the snow. You could have walked away. No one would have blamed you. You had every reason to think only of your own survival. His voice softened. But instead, you stood between a dying stranger and death itself. I was only doing what? What your heart demanded, Thorne said quietly. I know. A faint smile touched his mouth. That's who you are. You heal people, not just their bodies, but their spirits. Evelyn's eyes burned. You healed mine, she whispered. You gave me purpose again when I thought I'd lost everything. Then maybe, he said gently, we keep healing each other. Thorne lowered himself to one knee and drew out a simple gold band, worn smooth by time and intention. Evelyn Crowan, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, the heart of this ranch and this family? Tears slipped freely down her cheeks. Thorne, you know about Chicago, about my disgrace. I know you were blamed for something that was never your fault. He said steadily. I know you held to your principles even when it cost you everything. And I know you are the strongest, most compassionate woman I have ever known. his voice roughened. Your past made you who you are. I wouldn't erase a single moment, if doing so meant losing the woman standing before me now. She looked at him, the man who had given her sanctuary when the world had cast her out, who saw her not as broken, but as worthy. The answer rose from the deepest place in her heart. Yes, she whispered. Then, stronger, yes, Thorn Calderix, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her. Slow, reverent, filled with promise. The cottonwoods whispered in the spring breeze, and the stream sang on, eternal and patient. The wedding took place 1 month later. The entire valley gathered beneath the open western sky, the same sky that had watched them fall, fight, and rise again. Evelyn wore a simple white dress sewn by Mara Crowan and the ranch women, adorned with wildflowers that now symbolized new beginnings. Eldrick Warren, his joints greatly improved, played the fiddle. Selma Varex organized the feast, every family contributing what they could. Even Judge Ormond Valek attended, thoroughly chastened and determined to perform the ceremony with unimpeachable legality. Do you, Evelyn Crowan, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? She met Thorn's gaze and saw every battle they'd survived together. I do. And do you, Thorn Calderix, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? With all my heart, he answered. I do. When they kissed, the valley erupted in cheers. It was more than a wedding. It was a celebration of survival, unity, and love earned through fire. After the ceremony, Ryan Blackrin, clear-eyed and steady now, approached quietly. I owe you both more than I can repay, he said. You gave me a second chance when no one else would. That's what people do for one another, Evelyn replied softly. Everyone deserves another chance. Ryan hesitated, then produced an official document. My father's assets were seized to pay for his crimes. I kept only the homestead and enough to begin again. I'd like to donate part of the land for a proper hospital, if you'd consider running it, Mrs. Calderix. Evelyn gasped. A real hospital, not a makeshift clinic, but a place where she could fully serve, train others, and build something lasting. She looked at Thorn. He grinned. I married a healer, he said. I'd be a fool to stand in her way. The hospital opened the following winter, modest, sturdy, and vital, serving 3 valleys. Evelyn trained local women as nurses, teaching wound care, childbirth, and emergency medicine. The shame of Chicago faded entirely, replaced by respect earned one life at a time. Thorn expanded the ranch, implementing water-sharing systems that became a model across the territory. The cooperative spirit born from crisis endured. Myra Crowan later married Bren Hollow in a quiet ceremony. No one surprised after years of shared labor and loyalty. Her botanical research led to drought-resistant crops that helped the valley thrive even in lean seasons. 5 years after the night fate brought them together, Evelyn and Thorn sat on their porch at dusk, watching their children play. 2 boys with their father's steady gray eyes, and a little girl with her mother's gentle hands. No regrets? Thorn asked, drawing her close. Evelyn thought of her journey. From honored nurse to disgraced exile, from starving alone in a mountain cabin, to building a hospital that saved hundreds. She smiled. Not a single one. From a loneliness so deep it nearly destroyed her, to a love that filled every corner of her world. None, she said with quiet certainty. Every road I walked led me here, led me to you. That night in the snow, Thorne murmured, watching the children chase fireflies near the porch. I thought I was dying. Never guessed I was actually being born into the life I was meant to live. We both were, Evelyn replied softly. Sometimes the fiercest storms carry the greatest blessings. Their oldest son came running up, gripping a carved wooden horse. Mama, will you tell us the story again? The one about the snow and the bad men and how you saved Papa? Evelyn smiled and pulled her children close. The tale had become family legend now, told again and again, each version carrying a lesson about courage, mercy, and choosing to help even when fear says not to. Once upon a time, she began, during the harshest winter anyone could remember, a woman lived alone in a small mountain cabin. As she spoke, Thorne's hand found hers, their wedding bands catching the final glow of dusk. The cabin where she had nearly starved no longer stood. It had been taken apart plank by plank to build homes for new settlers. Yet its spirit endured. In every life saved, every neighbor helped, every act of healing that spread outward like ripples on water. That same winter sky still stretched above them, stars appearing one by one, bright, steady, eternal, over the valley that had become their home. Inside the house, lamplight glowed warm through windows that had never again known boards or fear. The water now flowed freely through shared channels, distributed fairly among all who depended on it. And in the hospital that bore her name, Evelyn Crowan's trained nurses carried forward her calling, steady hands, compassionate hearts, living proof that second chances could change the world. Love had found them in the coldest season of their lives, and like spring following snow, it transformed everything it touched. From a starving healer and a dying rancher had grown a family, a community, and a legacy of hope that would outlast them both. Because the best love stories don't end with two hearts joined. They go on, healing others, shaping futures, one brave act at a time. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Your presence means more than you know. If today's story awakened something inside you, don't let the trail end here. There are many more tales of courage, devotion, and faith waiting to be discovered. Subscribe, comment, share, and come back as we continue this unforgettable journey. Thank you, truly. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. All stories are intended solely for entertainment and may include fictionalized scenarios or dramatization derived from historical contexts. While AI assists in production, human creators supervise and adjust every piece to maintain sincerity, credibility, and emotional quality. We adhere entirely to platform regulations regarding AI content, ensuring no deepfakes or misleading portrayals. Licensed materials are used responsibly. Republishing, modifying, or extracting content without authorization is not allowed. We appreciate every viewer who respects originality and creative effort.